is Stronger Than My Father with Marcus Meneese.
Welcome to another episode of Stronger Than My Father podcast. This podcast is designed to bring more awareness to fatherhood and talk about some of the issues that surround fatherhood. Some will be good, some may be a little bit difficult to talk about. But this is just another way to bring more awareness to fatherhood. Special thanks to our podcast producer, Mr. Jim McCarthy, and also for our podcast assistants, Miss A. Renee Jones. Thank you for all their work. And I'm going to give a special shout out to my oldest son, Marcus Jr., who helped me this morning put a lot of this stuff together. It takes a while to put podcast stuff together. So I'm excited for our part 4 of our Mother's Day edition. Special guest this morning for this podcast. Many people see Marcus Meneese because I'm the face of Stronger Than My Father, but they don't know the people who in the background helping me get this organization where we at now. And so my guest is what people say, baby mama, but she's my wife for nearly 21 years. We have worked hard together to get this organization to where we at now, and I look forward to the future. So I would like to welcome my guest, my wife for nearly 21 years, Latoya Meneese. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hope I gave you a great introduction.
You could have said a little more, but that's all right.
And also my right-hand man who's going to be a guest on this podcast, who's helped me so much. And just on the last year with just encouragement. And I look forward to building a solid mentoring program. So thanks, Mr. Harold Simpson, for coming on, man.
Thank you, Marcus, man. Thank you.
All right.
I'm humble with it, man.
So this is special because a lot of people know Marcus, but they don't know Marcus' wife. And I want people on this podcast to learn more about Latoya, her story, and then how we not so much how we connected, but her story on fatherhood, parenting, and raising 2 sons. So, Latoya, I'm going to start out with one question is, let my audience know who Latoya Meneese is, where are you from, and how do you get to Nashville?
Okay. So, I am a Detroiter. I'm from Michigan.
What?
Detroit, Michigan. I was born at Henry Ford Hospital. Woo-woo to Henry Ford Hospital. But I actually moved to the suburbs of Michigan, to Belleville, Michigan, which is close to U of M in Ann Arbor. So I was there for the first 15 years of my life, and then I moved to Tennessee because the plants at General Motors was closing, and a lot of people, thousands of people, had to move to Tennessee or Texas. So my mother decided to move to Tennessee, and so I've been in Tennessee since '93, and went to school, and I missed my Michigan family tremendously. I'm 16, missing my family. It's just me and my mother in a foreign land. And, I'm 16, I'm a teenager. So, things start happening. My emotions changed. And, that is the start of really my story of Latoya, because I was sheltered with a big family. My mother had 8 other siblings. I had uncles, I had aunts, I had grandparents. I had so many people that were the village that raised Latoya. But then when I came to Tennessee, it was Latoya by herself. My mother worked a lot. So at that time, I was by myself at home.
So how's it growing up in the family, in the home? Because it starts there. How was it you growing up in a home, father, mother? Tell the story of how you started getting your foundation growing up in the home, and what did you see?
So when I was in Michigan, I saw the mother and father, husband, wife dynamic because I looked towards my grandparents on both sides, my father's side and my mother's side. So I was able to see that and recognize that by having a father and a mother in a household with children was very important. You couldn't get away with a lot when you have both parents.
No, you can't. You can't.
You can't. And then also, I was able to recognize the spiritual side. Both my grandparents went to church together in the same car. You know, I saw that dynamic of being together. And then when I moved to Tennessee, it was just me and my mother. My father was not there at that time. So it was just my mother and I. And we even had to grow a little bit because, you know, we didn't have that family to have our back and to tell us things. We had to figure it out, just me and her. So that difference of being alone came to play.
So, Toya, how did that affect you growing up not really having dad in the home? And
Well, I will say my father was actually there for me during the younger years. He was there. Every weekend he would come and get me. My mother and father divorced when I was 1. Wow. So that was the reason that we pretty much moved to the suburbs. My dad still stayed in Detroit, and along with his side of the family. So my dad was there through baby to before my teenage years. He was actually there. I was able to go and hang with him. He's a saxophone player. He worked at General Motors, but he was a saxophone player. He was known in Detroit. My dad was and still is a very good saxophone player. He had scholarships in a box, going to any college. He actually was there for me. And to that point, at the time, I didn't know that I had a half brother.
wow.
That my dad introduced us together. My brother Delano lived in California, and he flew him and his sister to Michigan to meet me. So I always wanted, I'm an only child, so I always wanted a sibling. So that was very exciting to me that, I have a brother. So I had that dynamic in Michigan. And it seemed like when I turned about maybe 12 or 13, that started to be a little shaky. I didn't see my dad as much. And then definitely when I came to Tennessee, I hardly was able to see him. Maybe talked on the phone, but he wasn't there at that time. And those are the formative years, when you're a teenager.
Of course.
Especially a female, you're looking for love. You're looking, you don't know you have a void in your heart. But so you're looking, and unfortunately you're looking, at these little, chicken head boys.
Chicken head. They got chicken head.
And because I didn't know who was right and who was wrong. I just wanted somebody to love me. Yeah. And I was trying to fill a void. So that void, unfortunately, had come when it was my teenage years being here in Tennessee.
Well, I know. Go ahead, Harold.
I was going to say that I've said it when me and Marcus sat down when I did my podcast and talked about my relationship with my father, which I didn't want to get the Kleenex and stuff like that, but it wasn't gonna get me crying. But today I was gonna try to break you. So it was two things that I had said during my podcast that was important to me when my father wasn't there, and what a father is time, patience, and admiration, and not having that father there and not having that person to call on when it's issues that you're having, especially you as a female. Your first love is supposed to be your father. Your father is supposed to be the one that shows you what the first love of a love of endearment, and not having that, even for me as a male, and not having my dad to show me how to tie a tie. Do I struggle now to tie a tie? Oh yeah, I still do. I still do. I might even ask Marcus to tie for me. I still do at 44 years old, still struggling with the stuff that is important. You know what I mean? That's where my struggle is at still to this day. And I hear you when you're saying that dad wasn't there during those times. Those are important times as a teenager that dad wasn't there. So I definitely.
Let me ask you this: in during them former time, do you grow anger and bitter during them times where he's not there?
Oh yeah.
So you're mad. You're growing up. You're mad, and so do that anger and that resentment turn into something else?
Oh yeah, it gets you in trouble.
Okay, is that why do you get a lot of teenage pregnancies at an early age?
Yeah, because
men are. I hate to say manipulative because I don't think most men are, but I think men know what to say to get to a woman.
But if you have a son who doesn't have a father and he does not know how to present himself to a female, and then you have a daughter who wasn't raised by her father, and both of those kids come together, they're trying to fill voids.
Yep. And that's why you're saying,
and that's the reason why there was. I believe so, because you're looking for something. You don't know at that time when you're adolescent that what's voiding in your heart is the love of your father. Your father, from a girl's perspective, is supposed to show you this is how a man is supposed to be. Yeah. This is the right way that a man is supposed to approach you. And from a male side, he has to be the one to present himself in a way that's civilized and that's loving. Well, when you start watching things on TV and then you see the social media and things crazy happening, you think that's your role model because nobody has shown you from a father's side, this is the way it really is supposed to be. You're supposed to love. You're not supposed to lust. And that's what is happening. You're not knowing as a young person that I am voiding something, and I'm looking for something and I don't know what it is.
So you're saying the father should teach the girl to save herself for marriage and stuff like that, not the mom. So you think the father portion is the strong piece? It's both sides.
You can't separate. God made woman and man.
With that.
You can't separate both of them.
But who leads the charge?
It doesn't matter because in the Bible, if you love God, then the man is supposed to treat the woman as a loving spouse.
Okay, we talking about spouse. We're looking at but that's teenage years growing up. Who protects that daughter? We don't have a daughter. We have two boys. So I'm going to talk to my boys whenever I have to have the birds and the bees talk. It should be me, but it's probably going to be me and you both. My point is that never raise a daughter. So who protects the daughter from the wolves of the young boys going up in high school? Who protects that daughter?
It's supposed to be the father.
Okay. So I just want to be clear on that point to say the father is the protector. And then the mom is the nurturer. So that's how I look at it.
So I'm looking at it like this. Mom is the nurturer. Dad is the protector.
Got it.
And if you look at it and you take it from another step forward, you can look at a lot of single parent homes that are happening because of a lot of teenage pregnancy, because, you might have some fathers who are not there or have not learned how to be a father and don't know how to be a father, or because they didn't have a father. It's called the two gens, it's a generational curse. And us as men, we should be training up our boys and talking to them and showing them how to treat women.
I mean, I totally agree. I think with me and Toya, because being married, we debate a lot. It's unfortunate we debate a lot.
That's the reason why you're here.
Yeah, that's the reason why you're here, to be the referee. Mainly because we have a crisis on our hand where you have teenage pregnancy on the rise. And I'm not blaming the girl. I'm not blaming the girl. I'm just looking at what can decrease it. What can decrease teenage pregnancy on your end for going without a father? What can decrease it now in 2022? What can decrease teenage pregnancy? Do more fathers need to be there for their daughters and step up and to train them to save themselves because of the potential problems? Most parents, and when I was mentoring, are young moms who saying, save my son because the dad is not there. And so what can continue to prevent that problem? So I want to do one story I want you to talk about real quick, because I know our time is going to wrap up quickly because we'll sit here and debate all day, is that when we first got married, you mentioned, I remember you and your dad didn't have the best relationship. You wrote him a letter, I think before MJ was born. Why was it important for you to write your father a letter back then, and how did you feel, and how did that what was the resolution for you writing your letter to your dad, and did that help you guys' relationship to this day?
So I did write a letter to my father because I was becoming a mother. And as you grow and mature, you understand that there's some things that you need to put in place where it creates some type of camaraderie. And I knew that I had to, for me to be a better mother, I had to let some weight off of my shoulders. And so I wrote that letter because I recognized that me and my dad did not have the greatest relationship in those formative years. So I wrote him a letter. I believe I sent it. I mailed it to him, I believe. And it was just my experience, what I went through, what's going on. It is very powerful, and I encourage everyone to do that. It's very powerful, even if your parent, your father is not alive. It is so powerful to start writing and really pouring out your heart, saying the things that you have been through, and it's not like you have to have an answer at the end of that letter, but it's just basically pouring out your heart and telling your father, this is what happened, this is my truth, and I want to forgive. I want to forgive you for all the things that I feel you have done, and if there's anything that vice versa, if he needs to, say, okay, I forgive you, Toya, for what you've done. If there's anything, then that's the time to do that. So I wrote the letter, and at the time, my father and I wasn't, still that good, and he had a different recollection of some things that I put in that letter, and that was fine because that's his truth. I have mine. But at least he never can say I didn't know. And I had to make sure that I put that out there because I needed to forgive. When you forgive, it's not for that other person, it's for you. So that way, that weight that was on your shoulders is gone. If you don't forgive, then that person is still sleeping, having a good night's rest, and you tossing and turning. No, the forgiveness is for you. So I had to forgive him for all the things that I believe he had done and why my experiences as a young adult even came into play. So that's what I did.
So you said the key word, forgive.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Harold. Uh-oh.
These are the key word, forgive. I'm gonna use me for example, based on this story. When I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, for a long time, I couldn't forgive my father. And God always said, forgive people, because, forgive but you don't forget. So couple of years ago, I just had an epiphany, just sitting down and talking and, talking to God and say, God, why my father doesn't want to be here? Why my father didn't come to my wedding? Mm-hmm. Why my father didn't come to my college graduation? Mm. So God talked to me and said, because maybe your grandfather wasn't the greatest father to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He wasn't the greatest father to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which my grandfather was a good guy, but wasn't the greatest father to him. Because my grandfather, he used to drink. Mm-hmm. So wasn't the greatest big father to him. So God said that maybe he didn't know how to be a father. Mm-hmm. So he said, you can forgive him, but don't forget.
What?
So don't forget. But I'm at that point in my life that I forgive him, but I don't forget. Mm-hmm. So that idea with a letter, I'm gonna definitely do that. I might have to write him a letter.
Well, I think when I remember we talked about writing a letter, you kind of say you released everything out in the letter. My mom said that in the last podcast. She did the same thing, but her dad didn't even acknowledge her. Mm. Mm-hmm. He didn't even say he was sorry. Mm-hmm. My grandfather didn't tell my mother he was sorry for what he did.
Wow.
And so he basically just took that to the grave. And to this day, that probably still affects Mom. She forgives, but she don't forget. She just kind of let it sit on the other side. Mm-hmm. So for now, you're a mother. We have our boys, 2 boys, Jordan and MJ. What have you learned from all you've endured to be a good parent, and putting up with me for nearly 21 years?
Ooh, Lord. Lord have mercy.
And how did it help you raise 2 boys? Because I know my part as the dad. I already know my part. I can always improve. I never say there's a perfect dad. I can always improve. But what have you taught them outside of things I taught to help them be better men?
Well, there were some things that I have to recognize, and that is, I wasn't clueless about what a father should be. Mm-hmm. I wasn't clueless about that. There were men in my life that helped me become a good mother, I believe. I didn't know, Marcus and I, when we got married, it was 7 years before we even had MJ. It wasn't like having children was on the list. Mm-hmm. If it happened, it happened, but it was 7 years. But there were many people, my grandfather, on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, were very instrumental in helping me. And then, my pastor, me and him, we're almost like father and daughter. And then also, other people, one of the other people that you had on the podcast, Keisha, her father, just looking at the dynamic of, him and her mother, Keisha's mother, raising girls, and just, I was always at their house because we were in high school, and, just looking at how great of a father he is. I mean, so I wasn't clueless in fatherhood. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I know now that that's the reason why I never wanted to have children, was because I didn't know if I was going to pick the right man for me to have children with, because I didn't want my children to go through what I went through. Mm. So I never really wanted children at first because of that. I didn't want them to go through what I went through. But looking at Marcus, and how he takes care of our children and allows time to be with our children, that opened my eyes in a different way. He was, one of the examples was, he was at Trevecca getting his master's, and I think he was working on his thesis. And MJ kept trying to go in in our office.
I remember that.
And I kept telling him, no, leave him alone. He's trying to get his, he's trying to study and do whatever that he was doing. And I said, leave him alone. And I kept saying it over and over. MJ just kept trying to come. And I'm like, I said this the first and second time. If I say it one more time, then I'm about to go off. And Marcus said, let him in. Marcus opened up the door. I said, let him in. And I said, but you're studying or you're doing your thesis. And he said, no, I will always make time for my son. And that was just like an explosion in my head. When he said those words, it just brought back things. It brought back, man, I wish I had time like that with my father. And then I thought, man, what a good dad he is to say, you know what, I got something really important in order for me to get my master's, but I will always take time out for my child. And,
I don't remember that story. I was
tears started coming down. It's just like everything was just brought. It was like my life came back again.
I remember the thesis. I remember that, but I don't remember Jordan, MJ. And you're right. I think I never wanted to be so busy with my life and all the work that, I'm trying to build that I never had time for my son. Because I didn't want my son to grow up and say, Dad, you blessed so many other people, but you were never there for me.
Right.
I don't want him to ever say that. And he can't say that because I'm going to work him. So he ain't going to say that. But I didn't know that story. So one thing I want to do as we wrap up is parenting advice. Parenting advice. Go ahead, Harold.
Okay.
But I want to tap on what you just said.
Go ahead.
That comes from your upbringing, Marcus. That comes from your dad being there for you. That comes from your dad making you mow that lawn. How to make that turn.
I'm about to go do that when I leave here. As soon as I leave here.
That comes from your dad spending time with you.
I agree with that.
That comes with you seeing what your dad was doing with you to make a difference with you and your brother, make a difference with your kids.
Yeah.
Toya didn't see that growing up. So that makes a hell of a difference. You spending that time with your kids, breaking that generational curse.
Sure.
By you spending that time saying that this is what I'm going to do, this is what my children are going to see. So when they get married, oh no, we're not going to do that.
They better. Because they ain't learning from,
they going to do the same thing.
Here's the thing is that I just didn't want to be the angry dad. Yeah, was my thesis important? Yeah. I was up 24 hours doing that paper because Mark's a last minute person. But I never want to be that kind of dad. I be stern when I need to be. But like my mother said in the last podcast, your children are going to operate what you see at home. And what you see at home, if I would have just slammed the door, he probably will remember that and say, Daddy slammed the door in my face. So I always wanted to see, MJ's like right now, he's 13, he's at formative years, but he's gonna watch pretty much my every move of a dad, like I did with my dad. My dad didn't give me an instruction on how to be a dad. I watched his every move, and even now, I watch him. I watch his every move, and that's what I want to. I'm trying to, and I know I can't be dad, but I want to be close enough where I can be a father to him. So, what parent advice will you give parents today who raising sons and who raising sons maybe single, who are raising sons single, that you can give them some advice to help them as we wrap this podcast up?
Okay. So I'm only 45, but do your homework first. Even if you're pregnant on your first child. If you don't have a relationship with your father, sometimes that can affect your children and you don't even know it. I wrote that letter to my dad because I had to release some things that was on me. I had to do that in order for me to be a good mother, and I recognized that. And I forgave. God says if you don't forgive others, then he won't forgive you. I'm sorry, but I need all the blessings I could get. I need every single one. Yep. So that's what I had to do, was forgive my dad for everything. But this is the blessing part about it, is that my dad and I are on talking terms. We talk all the time. We talk today, even. And I told him that I'm not going to bash him because I believe that, what God has for you is for you. God did that because he knew I could handle it. Mm-hmm. He knew I could handle it and I could be who I am today. That shaped me. Did I want to go through something like that? No, but it shaped me. So I'm saying that because don't try to be the victim. Mm-hmm. Push through it. Pursue. Do what you have to do to heal yourself. In order for you to raise your children in the best way you can. There's no manual out there on parenting. I'm sorry, but there's not. Manual. And, and you have to really be prayed up. You gotta pray. So that is my message, to forgive, to pray. Because if you don't pray, your manual really is God. Mm-hmm. That's really what it is. But you have to pray, and then don't put so much on yourself. Yeah, you may have a very rough childhood, but look at you now. And if you're in the land of the living and you're breathing, then heal yourself for the betterment of your child.
Mm. Well, I appreciate, like I said, you giving some parenting advice. I know we didn't get deep into our lives, but
thank the Lord.
Maybe we do a parenting podcast. I don't know on how to raise kids. I don't know. But I want you to share a brief of your story. Like I said, and Harold, I don't know what it means to grow up without a father, but I do know, I see some of the effects, the anger, the bitterness, of people growing up, and they allow their bitterness to take over their lives. And I say, Harold, you always have a great story. And then Toya, I knew her story from us being married. And it's funny that I married someone who has a similar story to my mom. That's weird. Mm-hmm. That's weird that you married the same thing. But you know what my dad did? He told me some things that I probably going to go through that she was going to do because he seen it with my mom. He said, son, so if Toya does this, you may not have to do this. You may have to do that. So we didn't talk about when we first got married. I used to spend all my time at my parents' house, and she would come home and I was never there. We didn't talk about that. But you know what my mom did? My mom looked at me and she said, Mark, you married now. You need to go home. So when your wife is home, you home. Mm-hmm. My parents in turn on her. They told me the truth. Mm-hmm. And then I tell you the story and I'm done, Jim, is when my parents moved in 2003, because I was always with my parents. We used to live right around the corner from my parents when we first got married.
I knew we had to move quick.
And my parents moved. My parents moved in 2003. They moved in 2003 to the country. So they like 30, 45 minutes away from me. And Toya said, I bet you won't go over every day now. And I'm literally mad at her for saying that. And but one thing my parents taught me is that if y'all have a problem, y'all both come to us. Mm-hmm. You don't come to me without Toya. Mm-hmm. She said, we don't take sides here. Mm-hmm. There was just parenting advice for marriage. My parents never took sides to say, okay, this is my son. I'm going to take his side and bash Toya. It's times my parents had to jump on me for stuff. Toya like, hey, you need to talk to Mark about this. And my parents jumped on me. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate their wisdom, their knowledge to help me be a better person. So thank you guys for coming on. Harold, thank you again, man. Toya, 21 years, almost 21 years of putting up with each other.
Lord have mercy.
We got two beautiful kids, and we work hard to raise our kids, and hope that they can be good men. So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Stronger Than My Father podcast, Mother's Day edition. You can check out this podcast and other podcasts on our website at StrongerThanMyFather.org or on our YouTube page at Stronger Than My Father. You can catch it on Spotify, Instagram. It's a lot of ways you can catch this podcast. So please continue to support this program. Join us. And thank you so much for your time. God bless you. See you on another episode of Stronger Than My Father podcast.